Good evening, everyone. Well, good afternoon, actually. It feels like evening, now that it's getting darker soon. But happy fall. My name is Mishka Ligot with the Wisconsin Book Festival, and I'd like to welcome all of you watching from the comfort and safety of your respective homes to a very special reading featuring Clemonce and Tomas Morin with their new books, Tragic City and Machete, respectively. The Wisconsin Book Festival, presented by the Madison Public Library in partnership with the Madison Public Library Foundation, presents free public author events that celebrates books and sparks conversations. Each year, the festival creates a robust schedule of accomplished and new writers whose fiction, nonfiction, and poetry books appeal to all ages of readers. The festival presents standalone events throughout the year with a culminating celebration each fall, which is what we're having now. As we slowly crawl out of this devastating pandemic, the Wisconsin Book Festival has pivoted to a hybrid format of both in-person and online events. We'd like to thank you for your patience, for your consistent support of our online events in 2020, and invite you to attend the other events that the WBF has lined up for tonight and this weekend. Please continue to support your local bookstores throughout this pandemic and consider placing an order for Clemonce and Tomas's books through a local and independent bookstore. We have a good number in the state who are happy to provide shipping, curbside pickup, or masked and socially distanced in-store shopping. Before we proceed with the reading, we'd also like to recognize that the Wisconsin Book Festival is being broadcasted to you from Tijo, Four Lakes, which is traditional Ho-Chunk land, historically encroached and occupied through unjust legislations and treaties, such as the Indian Removal Act of 1830. We recognize the Ho-Chunk as the original and true stewards of this land and honor their continued resilience and resistance, along with that of the 11 other federally recognized First Nations that reside within the porous borders of this state. May we see the fruits of their struggle towards self-determination in this lifetime and for countless generations, and work towards a more equitable future. Clemonce is phoning in from Tallahassee, and Tomas is joining us from Austin. Finally, in the spirit of resilience and humanity's collective capacity for resourcefulness, we'd like to thank you viewers for your patience with our online format. Please bear with us should there be any technical issues that may arise during the reading. We'll also have some time for some Q&A with the authors after they read, so please use the box at the bottom of the Crowdcast page to submit any questions you have for Clemonce and Tomas at any time during the reading, and we'll do our best to accommodate your queries later during the event. It's now my joy to introduce our first reader, reading from his new book, Tragic City, which was selected by Major Jackson for the 2020 Anhinga Robert Dana Prize for Poetry. Formally dexterous, marrying lyric meditation with formal and oral history, Tragic City investigates the events of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre and wrestles with its impact on the community's history and the nation's consciousness. Patricia Smith, author of Incendiary Art, writes, quote, Clemonce Hurd's penetrative and muscular debut probes the blatant brutality perpetuated by white men from the towering perch of their self-imposed birthright, with an unerring focus on the tragic city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, where in 1921, that mercenary privilege resulted in the utter decimation of the flourishing Black community of Greenwood and the deaths of hundreds of its citizens. Since the massacre is still unknown to so many, Hurd urgently transports the reader into the moments of the tragedy, reviving the people and places that gave Greenwood its pulse, then moves it into the disquieting present day where the circumstances that led to the Titanic loss still exist and still resound, end quote. Major Jackson, who selected the manuscript for the 2020 Anhinga Robert Dana Prize for Poetry, writes, quote, though the nostalgic path that is memory often catalyzes a poet's lyric search for both language and measured rhythms which define their immediate presence in the world, longing alone will not guarantee an end to the oblivion. One must attempt, as Clemonce Hurd does here in Tragic City, to confront the intractable reality that smashes illusions of any civilized code. One must, quote, groove with the upright history of a people, end quote. Hurd provides many occasions for readers to meditate on the Tulsa Race Massacre, not as an excuse in, quote, wokeness, but as a means of launching grace. These poems model benevolence and presence, and I, for one, will return again and again to their virtues and music, end quote. Clemonce Hurd was born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. The author of Tragic City, Hurd was a recipient of a 2018-2019 Tulsa Artist Fellowship and was the 29th at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He earned a BFA in Graphic Communication from Northwestern State University and an MFA in Creative Writing from Oklahoma State University. Hurd's work has appeared or is forthcoming in Obsidian, The Missouri Review, Iron Horse, World Literature Today, Poetry, Rattle, and elsewhere. He currently resides in San Antonio, Texas, and serves as the Sala Diaz Artist in Residence. Reading from his brand new first book, please welcome Clemonce Hurd. Clem?
Mishka, thank you so much for that introduction. It's so good to see you. And thank you, Connor and the Wisconsin Book Festival for putting this all together. And thank you, Amy Quanberry and the good folks at UW's Creative Writing Institute and graduate program for championing my work and so many thanks. Room of One's Own, thank you for carrying both of our books. Tomas, thank you for agreeing to read with me. And yeah, the audience, thank you all for coming out to listen and start your Friday nights with us. And lastly, to my editor, who welcomed me into her home along with her two cats. So I may have some cats climbing during this time, but we'll just welcome them in. Okay, so I'm going to start with a poem that in the last week I've been thinking maybe this should have been the first poem in the book. So I'm just going to see what it sounds like and we'll move through. This poem is titled My White Wooer Whistles, Whistle While You Twerk. My white wooer whistles, whistle while you twerk, candidly, randomly, as a swallow's chirp in a grocery store. The fraught wings twittering to and fro, trying to find its way out, its way into the cultured milk. The aisles, owls ogle when blackness swoops in. The slammed door a spanking. The checkered tiles frigid as a riverbed that fetters the north to the south, all the while partitioning the window that separates cashier from customer, the kinfolk who drew the line in the sandbar and told us to take up the cross the current, the former, a dare, dar he, a steam whistles flirting, egret, ass up. This next poem is going to be from a series of persona poems that I found myself writing after listening to a few testimonies of many of the survivors at the time. The testimonies were filmed in the 90s, and all the survivors who were filmed or have passed away now. This is based on a testimony by survivor Venice Sims, who during the massacre, the night of the massacre, was her prom night. And so she never got to go to her prom night, but there were a few things that stood out to me, and this is what this poem is based on. The name of this poem is titled Cinderella. I told the seamstress I wanted my dress to flow like sheer curtains when the windows are open. Nothing caressing the floor, because I wanted my boyfriend to like it, but nothing too short either, because I wanted my daddy, who didn't know I had a boyfriend, to approve. Me and my girlfriends were so excited. We'd waited 4 feverish years, hearing of promises traded, and had finally made it. I hated the way the corsage cuffed my wrists, but loved the pearls my seamstress kindly let me don. They looked like the cord you pull on the curtains to let the world in, a choker nibbling my collarbone. Okay, I'm going to do one more from that series, and then I'll go to something else. So this poem is titled Race to the Riot, and it's after another Tulsa survivor, another massacre survivor named George Monroe, who he was filmed in several of the testimonies and included in many of the text that's out right now. Race to the Riot. Every Sunday, we stole coal from the freight cars to throw at the white kids, and they did the same. We didn't know what hate was. We just wanted to emulate what we saw our folks do. We threw and threw and threw in the name of our landlords, and they threw at us like the land was their lord. That had to be where I got my throwing on, where I learned to take a licking and keep going. I remember getting stoned in my right leg. It left a mark darker than my eyes, my skin, and a bruise. It made me smirk, but boy, did it hurt. The best thing was when our throws landed, they turned darker than the coldest of hearts. And thanks to our sooty hands, our teeth were our only white parts. So in putting this book together, I mentioned my editor earlier, and we were going back and forth about which poem to start the book with. And I'm going to read one that she mentioned. And this poem is based on the Aretha Franklin documentary, Amazing Grace, which me and a friend, while we were in Tulsa, we went to one of the independent theaters, Circle Cinema, to see it, and we were mesmerized. So this poem is based on that. Amazing Grace. Behind every Black choir is a white man, an oil-painted, oily-maned Jesus. Yes, a token of the colonizers' appreciation for our work songs, for the hymnals and hymens of our fugitive relatives, in pews mainly made up of Afro-crowned sisters and brothers who shout, "All right," and "Come on now," shaking their heads at the mechanism we call church. In the film, Black folks are dressed to the T when Miss Franklin walks in all silent movie like a teacher who don't take no shit. And we can't tell if it's an act of diva or deviltry, of humility or the hum the word and gospel begins with. The Queen of Soul almost seemed to hover in her robe, her father's house, rooms her chords grew up in. She looked just like a little girl who'd broken from her chains, like a spirited savior sweating blood. Her father daubed her face and the Steinbeck that helped her carry the melody and cross her legs aloft the days, 2 days for 2 days. And on the third, she rose from her bench, ascended the middle aisle, Gentile yet again. I think I'll do two more and that'll be it. So I ended up in Tulsa because I was awarded a fellowship there, and much of the fellowship was traumatic to some, and to some of us, was just fine. But I just thought about my time in Tulsa, and I thought about the land that I was on, which I discovered after I got there, that the land was part of the largest battle of the massacre. And so I found that looking out of my window, I was looking at the battle that had been paved over, and, parking lots and overpasses. So this is one of the poems that I wrote in a series of poems in the book that's titled Compartmentalizing at the Refinery. You are here in your apartment. Then you are here outside your studio when the communications director asks if you have a second. Asks, what's your craft? Artist. Asks, poet? Artist. But you write poetry, right? You don't break down the word poetus. You don't tell the communications director you earn a degree in graphic communications and creative writing. You don't define pigeonholing as a small recess for nests. You don't define pigeonholing as a desk compartment in which letters are kept. You don't define pigeonholing. You don't explain the whiteness of the dove. If you have a feather, you say, for every time, you say, someone didn't take the answer you gave them, you say, you'd only need strokes of tar. You say, just put writer. The communications director says, okay. Clipboard strolls into the office that borders your studio. The wall soon to be knocked down, renewal. You are moved into a cubicle that communicates you are a writer. You are here. Okay, this will be the last poem. Thank you all so much for your attention, for listening to me and getting ready to listen to Tomas. I'm going to just end with this. So while I was in Tulsa, I met this guy who is who pretty much has been taking care of animals since he was about 7 years old. And he was wearing a snake, and I got to talk to him for a little while, and this is just a poem that came from this interaction. Thank you all again. The Soir Disant. Jungle Boy scarfed the snake around his neck as if he needed to be kept warm at Tulsa's 30th annual Juneteenth celebration, held in a vacant floodplain on a campus fitted for 20,000 scholars that fails to exceed 5,000, instead of North Squalor or Guthrie Green, where Black folks don't show unless Dougie Fresh and Big Daddy Kane rock the stage, the field adjacent to the adjunct building erected where Greenwood thrived before assimilation or the interstate's partition. He donned the snake as if to audition terror, to gauge how far we'd come from genetic trauma. Told me he'd been stapled a few times, but nothing fatal, nothing to make him fetal like a feral cat taking a nap. He modeled it to take pictures, said he charged $5 here, 50 in Miami, Oklahoma. Said his family knew of his infatuation since his youth, that he sought his friends in collars and collards, some collage of his living animas for education, for my friend to take a free picture of us and his 4-foot python. My heart flushed with confusion and a fear that comes from something so foreign I couldn't pet or put my finger on it, though both photos with my arms folded say I was brave. Thank y'all again.
Oops, I was on mute. Thank you so much, Clem. Absolutely breathtaking work. I'd now like to introduce our next reader, Tomas Morin, reading from his new book, Machete, out from Alfred A. Knopf. Quote, Dios aprieta pero no ahorca. God squeezes, but he doesn't strangle. The epigraph of Machete sets the stage for a powerful poet who summons a variety of ways to endure life when there's an invisible hand on your throat. Tomas Morin hails from the coastal plains of Texas and explores a world where identity and place shift like that ever-changing shore. In these poems, culture clashes like waves and leaves behind Billie Holiday and the CIA, disco balls and Dante, the Bible and Jerry Maguire. They are long, lean, and dazzle when they're telling. Whiteface is a list of instructions for people stopped by the Duct Tape lauds our domestic life from the point of view of the tape itself. One part Groucho Marx, one part Job, Morín considers our obsession with suffering, quote, the pain in which we trust, end quote, and finds that the best answer for our predicament is sometimes anger, sometimes laughter, but always via the keen line between them that may be the sharpest weapon we have. The poet Philip Levine writes of Morin's work, I call the voice of this poet a common voice, a voice a poet could take into an entire lifetime of memorable writing, end quote. Cassidy Faust and Zoe Cole of LitHub write, quote, Morin's writing uses the mundane details of everyday life, from pretzels to geese to blues music, as if jumping off a point for creating fascinating and philosophical worlds, end quote. Tomas Morin is the author of the collection of poems Machete and a forthcoming memoir, Let Me Count the Ways, as well as the poetry collections Patient Zero and A Larger Country. He is a co-editor with Marie L'Esperance of the anthology Coming Close, 40 essays on Philip Levine, and the translator of The Heights of Machu Picchu by Pablo Neruda. He teaches at Rice University and Vermont College of Fine Arts. Reading from Machete, please give a warm welcome to Tomas Morin. Tomas?
Mishka, thank you so much. And thank you to Connor and the Wisconsin Book Festival for having me. This is such an honor. And Clem, those poems were knockouts. I've enjoyed Tragic City so much. It's just such a brilliant and necessary book. More of that. Thank you to everyone out there who we can't see, who the four of us or the two of us can't see, who are tuning in. It's such a strange thing to go out and read to a screen and not be able to see people and exchange energy with them. But at the same time, it's great to be able to beam people in, from so many different places. I'd like to start with a poem called Heretic That I Am. 3 days now, the mold has advanced across the face of the peach I caught with one hand, like Willie Mays, saving it from the sidewalk and its army of black shoes. And how could it happen that my peach turned into Castro, the young one who regularly baptized the microphone in the first row of sleepy workers with his spit and anger and love? What is love if not a commitment to fatigues? And I wonder if he wore sea green trunks to the beach or olive pajamas with padded feet. I have to know if mold lived in his crisper too. And did it goose step even in that temple of cleanliness, before which he kneeled and hunted the last rebellious grape, unwilling to bear the tyranny of vines? This morning, I am the one kneeling and praying in the kitchen over the beard of my communist peach, how it's a second cousin of the hacky sack, albeit spongier, like a meatball, which reminds me the letter M is for Marx, and for moonshot, and for miracle. And sooner or later, M is also for mercy. Mercy, we have beauty. Mercy, we can't live forever. Mercy, we have time and rot to work our stubborn flesh away from the bald, pale soul that screams with joy when it pops up and free toward the first night of October in Indian summer. I don't know if y'all remember this, but a few years back, it was, I believe during the summer, it seemed like almost every week there was a different report of on the news of someone being spotted who's dressed up as a clown. Usually they were hanging out like at the edge of a playground or at the edge of an apartment complex, and I kept waiting to find out what was, follow-up reports on these clown people. And I remember I told a friend, I said, I bet you money not a single one of these clown fools is going to be arrested, much less shot by the police. Whereas, all you got to do is, check the Twitter, check the news, and BIPOC folk can't go to the post office without worrying about not making it home. So I wanted to write something about that. This is the poem that came of it. Whiteface. We drove 5 miles under the speed limit. We kept the nose of our cars out of crosswalks. We signaled early. In the trunk, the spare was full of air. We made sure we had gas. Running out of gas left a lot to chance. Don't get stranded. Our mothers had always said, in the wrong neighborhood, or on the highway, or alone, or with our friends. Keep both hands on the wheel. Is your registration up to date? Did you replace the bald tire? It wobbles. You know who wobbles? Drunks. We nod and nod. Nodding doesn't comfort our mothers, not like in the 70s and 80s. We were still children then. We hadn't learned to lie yet, at least not well. Breaking curfew was still in the future. Our mothers wanted us safe. They still believed this was possible back then. They nod and we nod. Our two heads swing back and forth like a Newton's cradle. You know the toy, if not the name. It often sits on the desk of people who give orders. 5 suspended spheres are lined up. They are made of steel. Lift one and they will click and clack forever. You can see it now, can't you? This toy that proves momentum and energy are not lost. Sometimes only 2 spheres are used, but our heads are not made of steel. They are made of stardust. Stardust is surprisingly delicate. It is delicate like a trapeze. Our heads swing high in the dark. Our country is a circus tent. The trapeze has always been the last act of the night. This is why we nod and nod, because we are at the end of something. From down below, when the light catches our heads, they shine. They shine like disco balls. They shine like something sharp, like a thing that could light your way, that could make your heart race, that could free you. We saw a trapeze act on TV once. 2 people passed a ball to each other. It was shaped like the earth, if the earth were made of glitter. We wanted a ball like that, so we collected pounds and pounds of empty cans to sell all summer. Coke, Mountain Dew, Pepsi, Big Red, Crush, Miller Lite, and Coors too. Not unlike the ones on the shoulder now, where we have been pulled over because of a phone call, because a dog crossed the road, because a diaper needed to be changed, because the route to the dentist was under construction. We are big, we are small, our clothes are plain. We are wearing pants, we are wearing a dress, a shirt with sleeves, a shirt with no sleeves. The bullet leaves its jacket on the road. The speedometer squats at 0. Red and blue lights dance in the mirror. What if next time we wore a doctor's coat, hung a stethoscope around our necks? What if next time we wore our mother's camouflage? We could be the color of sand and rocks. What if next time we wore a black suit and shiny black shoes, a white priest collar around our throats? When you say, "Show me your hands, get on the ground," we could say, "Hail Mary, full of grace." What if next time we paint our faces white, like a happy clown? Say we were on our way to wave at kids with our machetes from the edge of the woods, near a playground, near a house, near a school. This person has the right to remain breathing. Anything they say can and will be used against them in a court of law. They have the right to an attorney. If they cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for them. Do you understand the rights I have just read to you? With these rights in mind, do you wish to speak to us? Goose step. A collector of walks, I was practicing my llama step when one of those white geese with the knob of cheddar on its bill honked at the goslings, ignoring the art of the rank and file, so adored by Mussolini and other assorted lunatics, who I have trouble believing could ever raise one leg parallel to the earth they scorched without falling prey to gravity that was given a special kind of dominion over the fascist paunch, a shabby thing I have never seen hang around the waist of a goose. Though who can say for sure under all that heavenly down where the hips of a goose begin and end? And even if tomorrow some budding scholar published a treatise titled The Mystery of Goose Hips to fanfare, it would be an exaggeration of the grossest kind to equate a goose's trumpet with the barking from the balcony by the sad bullies whose love of the locked leg I will never understand, since the knee was so obviously made to flex, which means locking one is most likely a kind of sin against Darwin or God, both of whom I think would disapprove of anything so unnatural as even 20 people moving in stiff unison to music, unless the brass and strings were just about to sway and bend to the hot version of When the Saints Go Marching In. I'm going to close with a poem that I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Machete movie franchise with Danny Trejo and Jessica Alba. I'm a huge fan. At the end of the second movie, there's a faux trailer for what would be the third movie, which would take the franchise into space. And that was probably like 10, 12 years ago now, and they've never made the third movie. And I've been waiting for the movie for so long to be made that finally I just got impatient. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to write a poem into that universe. So you get this poem, Sartana and Machete in Outer Space, and it's in the voice of Jessica Alba's character. So you just have to imagine that my hair is long and I have better eyebrows. There's been so much death, so much killing from space. The wall along the Rio Grande isn't even a shadow of a shadow. The rockets of his jetpack are cold now. His mama named him Isador Cortés. Mexico renamed him Machete, aka Navajas, aka Cuchillo. Isadoros is Greek for gift from Isis, the goddess who took the shape of a scorpion and healed the sick and raised the dead. How can I explain the man behind the legend? Not everything people say is true. For one, he never joined ICE. He was no good at following orders anyway. And yet, on Sunday mornings, while I slept, he'd stalk the neighborhood for pan dulce and barbacoa for tacos. Not too oily, not too dry. To the ladies, my papi is puro catnip, a saber-toothed bone, a walking Juan the Conqueror route. Even the Selena statue whistled at him when we drove to Corpus so I could show him how to fish. When he was born, God said, "You will be a Mexican, not a Mexicant." He finishes rewiring the navigation system of a nuke he's sitting on and winks at me. Outer space is cold, colder even than the day he thought I was killed. We didn't know the villain of the month had messed around with clones. So while I was held captive on a space station, my poor Machete put my double in the ground, Agent Sartana Rivera, while 21 guns saluted her. What did my man find when he followed the bad guy into space? Hundreds of kidnapped immigrants forced to build a space station at gunpoint. 240,000 miles above the earth, it's the same old shit as down there. Can you believe Cortés means polite? I lost count of how many bad guys he's killed. He doesn't even know. When I asked him once, he said, "Machete don't count." And then laughed so hard, I thought the sombrero of the woman tattooed on his chest was going to fall off. Life hasn't been all bad. He did find me here in space. You could say our love is galactic now. He's only a cucuy to the pendejos who see gardeners, busboys, and maids when they look at us. What I see is not God's scorpion or a hurricane of blades, but the man I love riding a nuclear missile like a Harley into the mouth of a black hole. He's like a chromed out star that forgot how to fall. I know when my papi lights up the sky in a few minutes, people are going to talk and say all the babies born today were born under a bad sign. The blister on my heart and this machete in my hand say different. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tomas. That was an incredible set, and I'm so excited at the chat. I'd also like to welcome Clem back to the virtual stage. And it's now time for some Q&A. If you viewers, folks at home, have any questions to ask either of the authors, please use the question tool at the bottom of the Crowdcast page to submit your query. Thank you so much for reading to the both of you, and congratulations on your 2 new books. Oops. I have a very slightly annoying MFA student question about logistics. So Clem, this is your first book. It's a prize-winning one at that. It's like, wow, congratulations. And Machete is Tomas's 3rd book of poetry. Clem, as someone who's put out a book for the first time, like your first book out, like how does that feel? Like, do you feel like, oh, like my life's work is here and it's out into the world and I can, you know, like do other things now, or I don't have to think about it anymore, or I have to work on a new thing? How does that feel? That's directed at you. And then for Tomas, what's it like putting out another book, right? Like, is it, oh, I can close this chapter of my writing, or I can close this project and move on to something new, something different. You also publish in other genres, so I wonder how that's been going in just like a you know, the sequence of putting work out into the world.
For sure.
Either of you can answer first.
I'll defer to Clem.
Okay. Thanks, Mishka, so much for that question. It's scary, man. It's really scary. Like I was saying earlier, I chose a poem that's really late in the book to read first because I'm still revising this book in my head. And so, you know, I'm just thinking about like, how do I, not necessarily like, how do I do the next work, but I'm still kind of focused on this one, and I'm writing other things, but I don't know, like I'm eager to see what people are going to say about it, and, you know, and to just keep revising, really, like revising towards the next work.
Very great. Tomas?
For me, I mean, I remember when when my first book came out, you know, there's the sense that we all have when we're debut authors, of this sense of arrival. Not that I've arrived, right, but this sense of like, okay, like this is where the party's going on, right? You know, and I've made it. You know, I found the door, right, and I'm here. And with this third book, it's interesting. I still have that sense of arrival, but in the sense of not that I'm arriving at something in terms of like publication, but arriving at myself in the poems. I mean, I started working on my MFA in 2000. And since then, I feel like one thing when I look back and I track through my books, one thing that's been happening is that it's taken me like 20 years to get to a place where I feel like this is the voice that's on the page, the mind that's on the page, the way I shape the way the thought is on the page. This is the closest to me that I've gotten in any of the books. So in a way, I feel like I'm arriving at myself, you know, in this book. The first book was a lot of persona poems. I was writing a lot through masks because I thought, who the hell wants to know what I think, you know, in my voice? So I would slip behind a mask, and that I thought was interesting, and it was still me, right? But yeah, so that feels new, you know, that feels new. It feels nice and welcome. And for the other genres, it's I mean, my training is as a poet, you know, and I have the memoir coming out next year, and I had to figure out like when I got the idea that I should write one, like, well, how do you write one? You know, so I was tapping my friends who are nonfiction writers, and, you know, reading everything I could, reading the classics, reading the experimental stuff, and just everything. I'd never planned to be a translator, or to write in prose, or to write essays, do any of that stuff. It's just been a constant following of my curiosity, you know, wherever it leads. I know sometimes we poets, we get silly, and when someone asks you, like, do you call yourself a poet? Like, I know people are like, yeah, I don't call myself a poet, you know, and it's like I've had to make the the switch from calling myself a poet to just calling myself a writer. I was like, oh, like, you know, I'm doing various things. Like we're all writers at the end of the day.
Thank you. I actually have more questions, but we have a lot of interesting questions coming in too that are about putting a book together. Someone from the audience wants to know, so Clem, you mentioned that you thought a poem you read first would have started the collection. Can the both of you talk about how you go about putting together a collection? You know, some folks are like, everything I write from this year to this year, that's a book. Or like, I have a project, right? Or, you know, yeah, so this audience member would love to hear your thoughts on that when putting a collection together.
We having some cat time over here, yo. All right, Rupert. So putting the collection together. So I put my collection together at my partner's house, and all right, Rupert. And I just printed everything out, put it on the floor, which I've heard like, you know, many people do, or they put it across their walls and, you know, then try to figure out the order. And I thought I had it right. And in terms of just writing poems, I was telling my class the other day that it's probably about somewhere between 10 and 20% of the poems I wrote about Tulsa and about the massacre made it into the book, because most of them were either no good in terms of like just not getting to whatever the core that they needed to get to, or if I felt like I was repeating myself. And so that was the challenge was, you know, especially like spreading all the poems out on the floor, was like to figure out, okay, what feels different, you know, and how do I put these poems together? How do they speak to one another? But the poem that I read first, that I really do believe it should be the first poem in the book. I'm thinking that partly because my editor said, you know, you should go with like a shorter poem. And I was like, no, I want to go with this poem. You know, I had this poem in my mind. I was so stuck on it. And we didn't even talk about the poem that I read first, but I just thought about it this week because I was thinking some of the images in the poem I read today are also in the last poem, the poem that ends the book. And so I kind of wanted that echo to happen, that long distance, you know, echo to be happening, or like that kind of framing, which, I mean, maybe it's still happening. And I'm very pleased with the first poem in the book. But like I said, I'm still revising. You know, if it goes to like a second edition, I'm gonna be begging to try to put it up front, probably. My editor's
like
waiting.
The director's cut.
Right, exactly. And they'll probably shoot me down or something, but you know, I'll be trying for it.
I've done the same, like, you know, the printing out, you know, putting things on the floor, and the thing that, like, the challenge I found about it was I feel like that the idea is to get that bird's eye view, right, where you can take it all in and see what the shape is, what it looks like. And I felt like I would get up on a ladder and look down and see if that would, like, if I could get far enough away, like, you know, in the space of the room. That didn't help. And then I saw something that a poet was doing once. Like, she was looking at a manuscript that was about this big. And I was like, what is that? And she was like, oh, this is the manuscript for my next book. And what she did is she would print it out normal size and then run it through a Xerox machine and shrink it to a quarter of the size of each page. So as each sheet of paper came through, it had 4 pages, right? And she would cut those out, brad them together, and she would have this mini version, a pocket-sized version of her manuscript that she could just slip in her pocket and take with her. And wherever she was, she could just like deal them out like a deck of cards. And I was like, oh man, yeah, that's it. Like, you know, instead of getting higher up in the air, like I can shrink the thing. So I've done that with my books, and it's helped a lot. The other trick I have is, you know, there's that thing that Robert Frost says, that if a book has 24 poems, the 25th poem should be the book. So I was trying to think, like, well, what does that mean in literal terms? So one thing I do is I'll like make some note cards, and on the note card I'll write out the first line of each poem, and then make like a little deck of cards of those. And then sometimes another version of that is I'll just have the first line and the last line of each poem. So then I can see, kind of like, if you're putting together an album or a DJ set, how one outro of one poem bleeds into the intro of the next without getting, like, for me, my mind gets muddled if I'm considering all the notes and everything that's in the middle. And then just deal those out, like cards, until it feels like there's a good flow, from poem to poem.
Wow, that's brilliant. I mean, I didn't ask that question, but I'm selfishly pirating. I'm like gonna take notes on how. Another audience member would like to ask, how/where do you find the inspiration or ideas to write enough poems to fill a book? I like that word, enough. Enough poems to fill a book, right? Like for some, like they write hundreds and it fits into one, or others like struggle to put together like a project. So I guess this audience member, like, your takes on that. How do you find the inspiration or ideas to write enough poems for a book?
Tomas, I want to chew on that for a second. Can you back?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think like for me, like a long time ago, I kind of made the decision that I was going to make as much room in my work for my life and the world. So what that meant was, as long as I'm alive, like there's stuff happening that can go in poems. But I've been trying to cheat a little in terms of like one thing that I've had in the back of my mind is, or rather I should say, there's a book I'm chasing. And the book that I'm chasing is Geography 3 by Elizabeth Bishop. 10 poems, 9 original, 1 translation. And I know they cheated a little because the font's kind of on the big side, to get it right to 50 pages. But I would love to be able to write a book with just 10 poems, have a book that feels full and like there's nothing missing. Kind of like the same experience you have if you're listening to like Coltrane's My Favorite Things, 4 songs, right? You listen to that album, doesn't feel like there's anything missing. So part of that is my poems are getting longer. Like Machete has 2 10-pagers, I think like 1 4-pager, a few 3-pagers. I think Machete has 21 poems in it. And still I'm like, I got to get that down. Like what can I trim up? What can I trim up to just really pare down to the absolute most essential. So I feel like I didn't hit that, right? I'm not even in the teens, with Machete. So I'm like, okay, next book, that's what I'm shooting for. So I mean, I can have a book with 20 poems. I can have a book, yeah, so I'm cheating a little because of that.
Thank you, Clem. You're able to chew on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking what Tomas is saying about just trying to be as tight as possible, and that's tough for me. It's really tough for me. I love it when I read it, when I can, I mean, you mentioned Coltrane, Tomas, and then I'm trying to think of like collections of poetry, and I think a lot about Natasha Trethewey as being like that poet. If I think about domestic work, but especially if I think about Native Guard, of that being such a tight book where it's like every poem hits, every poem is just, it has this heft to it, and I want to write that one day, and I think about albums as well, and I think about how, wow, 7 songs or 10 songs, and that's all I needed. And I'm afraid of albums that are like 20, 25, like those Drake albums. I'm afraid of all of those. I'm just looking at it like that's too much space. Like, like it's hard for that many pieces of art to just be consistently brave, for us to come up and show up consistently brave and true. And I just find that hard. And so, but I don't know, I'm a person where I'll churn out, some days 1 poem, 2 poems, some days 5, 6, 7. And because I'm not really, I don't know, I'm kind of treating everything that comes as, this could be something. And so I just end up with a lot of work and you know, a lot of work is never going to see the world. The world's never going to see it. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I think about abundance. I don't worry so much about like, am I going to have enough? I worry about like, am I going to have too much? And let me figure out how to condense this. But I think the other side of that would be a poet like a poet Robin Cost Lewis, who also, if you look at Voyage of the Sable Venus, I mean, that book is more than twice as long as Native Garb by Natasha Trethewey. But if you look at them, I mean, the formatting is very similar in terms of 3 sections, but also that book is tight. To be such a big book, I think it's like 100 and maybe 26 pages or something like that. But it's a tight book. Still, to be that large, it's a tight book. And so I think about that too. And I think about, you know, how do I, if I'm going to write this much, like, can I get close to that? You know, can I get near that? So.
I'm on the other end of the spectrum from you for in terms of productivity. This is partly why I cheat also. Because I average like 4 to 5 poems a year, you know, that I write. Like this year, I've only drafted 2 that I haven't finished, you know, and I'm like, I don't know if I will finish them, you know, before the year's out. But they got to be home runs, you know, as low as my productivity is. It's yeah, like I stick with them until they work, you know.
That's too much pressure for me. I applaud you, Tomas. That's like way too much pressure.
Yeah, I think folks yeah, like have a very specific idea of like productivity and generating work, and it's different. It's different for each poet.
If I hit 7 in a year, I'm like, what's this abundance? You know, it's like
you're like, what speed bump did I hit?
This is like 2 years worth of work. Like,
right. Yeah. I actually have another question about the books as objects. This is stunning art on the both of them. Like, these are really pretty books, objectively. Tragic City features the photograph Flowers in Tulsa, which continues all the way to the back by Nicole Dones. Machete has a stunning graphic by Braulio Amado, and I can see you've got a print behind you, Tomas. Can you two speak more about these pieces and how they became part of your work? Did they precede the book? Or were you aware of these pieces as you were writing, or was the art a decision that was made like in the publishing stage? I'd love to hear more about these works.
For me, it was Machete was the first book that I've written that I had 0 ideas about a cover. For all the others, I'd been collecting images as I was going along, because I know publishers ask, right? They ask, you know, do you have anything you can send us? I didn't have anything. So I sent my editor a picture of this this cardigan, and I was like, the only thing I can say is I'm gonna wear this Gucci cardigan for an author photo. That's all I can tell you. That's all I got. All I can give you. I had no idea that she was gonna send that to Braulio, and then Braulio would be like, "Oh, hey, I'm gonna make a cover out of that." You know, I was being like half silly, you know, when I sent her that, and yeah, I was like, I got to buy myself something nice. Like when I got my advance for my book, and the cardigan, I first saw it. It was on that TV show Ballers. It was Denzel Washington's son who wears the cardigan. And I was like, oh man, like, and it's been like sold out for years. But I found it on this like cool aftermarket website, and I got it. I think it was got it from Brussels, and it came, and you know, I did the author photo stuff. And then when I saw the cover, I was like, oh, like this is, you know, I don't know that I can do a reading while I'm wearing the cardigan. It's too much tigers. You know, it's going to be too much tigers. But anywho, that was the story behind it. But I love the cover. I love what he did with it. It was like, I would have never, yeah, it was such a surprise.
I love that. You could just send like a photo of an outfit to your editor and be like, this is like the energy I want to exude for this era. Like not just for this book, like as a poet. You know how like pop stars will like have a very specific like aesthetic. Yeah. Clem.
You know, I love the looks that you're talking about with the Gucci. funny.
It's like a cardigan too, of all things. I love that it's a cardigan.
Yeah. So to answer your question, which I love your question, Mishka, thank you so much for this question. I think it might be my favorite because it allows me to talk about two artists. One, the artist Nicole Donis, who took the photograph for the cover, and who's from right outside of Tulsa. And that was the first work of art that I've ever purchased. I bought it in 2019. And so since I've been around artists, and so since I've been an artist for, all of my life, I just wasn't used to buying art. But when I saw it, I said, I have to have that photo. And plus I know two of the artists driving in the car. They're part of this collective called Black Moon out of Tulsa. And so Gary, who's in the front passenger seat, and Beth, who's in the back. And so I thought I didn't have it for, I didn't even know my book was going to get picked up. I was just sending stuff out. And when it did, I talked to my friend who I was staying with at the time in San Antonio, and I said, hey, I'm thinking of using that photograph as a cover. And he was like, I think you should. He said, it's a gorgeous photo. I think you should use it. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to try to figure it out. So I'm a huge fan, and I'm a huge fan of Mos Def, and I have a friend who's a huge fan of Mos Def. And so I don't know if y'all are familiar with his cover of his first album, Black on Both Sides, but it's where and Natalie Diaz did something similar on her last book, post-colonial love poem, where it's the front of her face, same like Mos Def, it's the front of his face. He has the braids, and then the back cover is the back of their heads, right? And so you can see the back of Mos Def's cornrows. They're really young, like the the braids are like way up here somewhere. It's kind of gritty, and it's just one of my favorite covers of all time. And so I was trying to figure out with my editor, I was like, who's also a great artist, and I was like, how do we how can we make this the cover? And we just went through a whole bunch of figuring out, trying to maneuver. And at first the entire picture was on the cover, and then we found a way. He was like, I think we can wrap it around. And so we wrapped it around, and I was like, this is it. This is gonna be the cover. And yeah, I mean, I'm in love with it. I'm so in love with it. And yeah.
We're almost, I was on mute, sorry. We're almost out of time, but I love this one question. Just really quickly, if either of these books could be on a syllabus or reading list, what other texts would you want to be on it? Not necessarily other poetry books, but texts, right? So if someone were to teach a class on something and your book was on the reading list or the syllabus, who else would you want to see, or what other texts, what other works would you want to see, like just off the top of your head? So like, and to frame it another way, like what texts were in your head when you were putting these books together?
And that's a good question. Vice by the poet I. Sure. Kafka on the Shore by Murakami. Oh man. Probably something by Lorca. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Maybe Poet in New York.
Great, Clem.
I'm thinking first to come to mind is Red Summer by Ahmad Jamal Johnson. So yeah, I mean, that is really the book, one of the books that I just carried around with me. And I'll say Zone by M. Norbesi Phillip. And let me see. Man, that's tough. I'm gonna stick with those two. We don't have to do three.
No problem. I was also like, I can put in like film, records, it's all good. No. I'd love to take those classes where those are the syllabi. But thank you so much for those answers. I love how we got a little mini like lecture on putting together a book. But thank you so much on behalf of the Wisconsin Book Festival. I'd like to thank Clemonce and Tomas Morín for gracing us with their virtual presence and sharing their masterful work and writerly insight with us. And I'd like to thank all of you at home for making the long drive through a computer or tablet to be here with us tonight. If you'd like to purchase Clem or Tomas and Tomas's fabulous books, please support an independent bookseller and place orders right through our local stores, right in the thick of the Wisconsin Book Festival right now. So right after this, we have Celeste Headley, and Jill Louise Busby for their books. We've also got a ton of in-person events tomorrow. WisconsinBookFestival.org has all the details. So once again, thank you all for logging on, and thank you so very much, Clem and Tomas, for reading tonight. Thank you to Connor Moran. I'm Mishka Ligot with the Wisconsin Book Festival. Take care, stay home, wear a mask, please, wash your hands, hang in there, get vaccinated, get your booster shot, treat other people with grace and care. And we'll see you at the next reading. Maraming salamat. Good night. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you so much, Connor. Thank you all. Good night.